Today, we're covering one of the most controversial figures in Northern Ireland's turbulent history, Johnny Adair, often known by his nickname, Mad Dog Adair. From his rise to power within the Ulster Freedom Fighters, also known as the Ulster Defence Association, UDA, to his eventual fall from grace and exile, Johnny Adair's life story is filled with complex alliances, internal struggles, and violent confrontations that reflect the intense conflict known as the Troubles in Northern Ireland. John Adair, born October 27, 1963, grew up in a Protestant Loyalist family in Belfast. He was raised on the Old Lodge Road, a hotbed for clashes between Loyalist and Nationalist factions. Although his father, Jimmy Adair, wasn't involved in paramilitary activities, young Adair found his own way into a life that would make him one of the most feared Loyalist paramilitary leaders. By his teenage years, he was already part of a gang of skinheads, participating in both petty crime and political violence, which would soon escalate to acts that were far from petty. This early gang, known as the NF Skins, gained a violent reputation. They were associated with the National Front, a right-wing nationalist group in the UK, and their notoriety grew after attacking anti-racist concertgoers in Belfast. Adair himself started a rock against communism band called Offensive Weapon, which supported his early ideological leanings. This period marked the beginning of Adair's spiral into the violent and sectarian conflicts that engulfed Northern Ireland at the time. At 19, after a confrontation that led the UDA to give him a choice between a kneecapping or joining their ranks, Adair chose the latter and became a member of the Ulster Young Militants, the UDA's youth wing. His early involvement mostly included rioting and intimidation tactics, but his ambition and ruthlessness quickly got him noticed. Eventually, he moved up in the organisation, joining the C Company of the West Belfast Brigade. In 1993, Adair was appointed Brigadier of the West Belfast Brigade. He wasted no time forming what he called his dream team, consisting of former skinhead friends who became active UDA members. They turned the Shankill Road area into a stronghold, known for brutal, violent actions against suspected Republicans and even innocent Catholics. By the early 1990s, the UDA's leadership had changed. Notably, the South Belfast Brigadier and influential figure, John McMichael, was assassinated by the IRA, and Supreme Commander Andy Tyree resigned. This leadership vacuum allowed Adair to seize power within the West Belfast Brigade. Once in control, he pursued a campaign of violence against Catholics, often indiscriminately targeting civilians. Adair's ruthless approach earned him a fearsome reputation. He openly boasted about his hatred for Catholics, claiming that anyone who wasn't loyalist was a target. In 1993, Adair succeeded Jim Spence as Brigadier after Spence was imprisoned for extortion. 2 years later, Adair became the first person in Northern Ireland charged with directing terrorism. He admitted then to leading the UDA for the preceding 3 years, up to 1994. During this period, Adair and his associates were responsible for multiple random killings of Catholic civilians, with many of these murders attributed to a specialized unit led by Stevie Top Gun McKeague. At his 1995 trial, prosecutors highlighted Adair's dedication to fighting those he considered militant Republicans, a group that he equated with nearly the entire Catholic population. Royal Ulster Constabulary detectives estimated that Adair's unit killed up to 40 people within that time frame. In one interaction, he told a Catholic journalist from the Republic of Ireland that Catholics typically rode in the trunk of his car. Reports in 2003 suggested that Adair had received intelligence on suspected Republicans from the Intelligence Corps, which had even invited him to dine with them in the early 1990s. In his autobiography, Adair claimed that sympathetic members of the British Army often passed him intelligence on Republican paramilitaries, while the RUC Special Branch, whom he alleged harbored personal animosity toward him, relayed his location to the IRA. As the West Belfast UDA Brigadier, Adair held a seat on the six-member UDA Inner Council. His insistence on continuing violent operations led to frequent clashes with Joe English, the South East Antrim Brigadier, who favoured a peace settlement. The BBC described Adair as the most controversial, high-profile and ubiquitous of all paramilitary figures in Northern Ireland at the time. The IRA attempted to assassinate him in the 1993 Shankill Road bombing, targeting a fish shop with an office above serving as the UDA's Shankill headquarters, where a meeting was scheduled soon after the bomb detonated. The premature explosion killed one IRA member, Thomas Begley, and 9 others, including a UDA member and 8 Protestant civilians. The UDA's response was the Grey Steel Massacre in Londonderry, an attack on the Rising Sun bar that left 8 civilians dead, including 2 Protestants. Though Adair was targeted for assassination several times, he often exaggerated the number of attempts. In 1995, the authorities finally caught up with Adair. The RUC had gathered enough evidence from recorded conversations to convict him on charges of directing terrorism. Adair was sentenced to 16 years in prison and was transferred to the Maze prison, where he continued to wield considerable influence over Loyalist prisoners. During his incarceration, Adair continued his operations from within the prison walls. Allegations emerged that he was running a drug operation, bringing in a significant weekly income from selling drugs to other inmates. However, he also played a role in the peace process. In 1998, he agreed to talks with British Secretary of State Mo Mowlam, who persuaded him to support the peace negotiations that led to the Good Friday Agreement. In 1999, Adair was released under the early release scheme associated with the peace process. Upon his release, he quickly returned to the streets of Belfast, where he rekindled his influence and began to focus on consolidating power within the UDA. The year 2000 marked the beginning of a new chapter in Adair's life, characterized by violent feuds with rival Loyalist factions. Adair's aggression was not only aimed at Republicans, but extended to other Loyalists as well, particularly the UVF. He organized a Loyalist day of culture that ended in violence and sparked a series of clashes between the UDA and UVF. His actions forced many UVF members and their families to flee from the Shankill area. Eventually, the feud spilled into a wider internal struggle within the UDA. Adair faced fierce opposition from other brigadiers, particularly John Gregg and Jim Gray. Gregg, in particular, was a powerful figure in the UDA's Antrim Brigade, and tensions between him and Adair intensified to the point of outright hostilities. Adair's downfall within the UDA came in 2002 when he attempted to seize control of the organization. His overt associations with criminal elements, particularly the drugs trade, angered many in the UDA, who saw his activities as dishonoring the organization's supposed ideals. In September 2002, the UDA's Inner Council formally expelled Adair. When he refused to back down, the UDA took drastic action, and his West Belfast Brigade became a pariah faction. In early 2003, Adair returned to prison, his early release license revoked due to his involvement in unlawful activities. Shortly afterward, the UDA launched a final decisive attack against Adair's supporters, effectively eradicating his faction's presence in Belfast. Adair's family and remaining Loyalists fled to England, specifically to Bolton, where they lived in exile, isolated from the Northern Irish Loyalist community. In exile, Adair's life continued to be marred by controversy and legal troubles. In England, he and his supporters continued to associate with far-right groups like Combat 18 and engaged in criminal activities. Adair faced repeated allegations of involvement in the drug trade, and his son, Jonathan, known as Mad Pup, was also arrested multiple times for drug offences. Despite his exile, Adair's legacy continued to haunt Northern Ireland. Even years after his departure, Loyalist factions remained wary of his influence, and there were multiple attempts on his life by rival paramilitaries. In 2006, he received a large sum for a ghost-written autobiography, where he attempted to justify his actions and claim that his efforts were politically motivated rather than driven by criminal interests. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Adair became the target of assassination attempts orchestrated by both Loyalists and Republicans. Notably, a 2015 plot by Irish Republicans to kill Adair was foiled, and 3 men were convicted in connection with the conspiracy. The ongoing threats against his life speak to the lasting impact of his violent career. Adair's life has been the subject of several documentaries, including a segment on Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men series, which highlighted Adair's former comrade Sam "Skelly" McCrory. Adair's life is viewed as emblematic of Northern Ireland's complex and turbulent history, a cautionary tale about the depths of sectarian violence and the heavy toll it exacts on communities. Johnny Adair's story is one of intense violence, shifting loyalties, and a legacy that's been both condemned and romanticized within certain Loyalist circles. Whether seen as a violent criminal, a Loyalist freedom fighter, or a tragic figure caught in a broader conflict, Adair's actions have left a deep imprint on Northern Ireland. His life and legacy continue to be subjects of heated debate, underscoring the complexities of Northern Ireland's path to peace. That's it for today's video. Let us know in the comments section what you think of the Johnny Adair story, and I will see you on the next video. Stay safe.